So Rob, I've witnessed myself a couple of ransomware incidents, and I've seen those negotiations with organised criminal groups, and I've seen organisations on their knees. I'm sure many of us have. Can you maybe just walk us through an example of a ransomware incident from the view of the SOC, and what's so important in terms of the timeline, the data sources, and every other element that it makes up that response as being an effective one?
Sure. So we'll take a reactive incident response scenario first. Almost, what would happen if you didn't do things properly and the incident occurred? How would you backtrack? And then I'll try and say later on how you could proactively not have that situation in the first place. But so you imagine a typical ransomware attack. So the scenario may be they've compromised the network firewalls or the VPN. So it might not be an endpoint attack at all. Therefore, you've not got EDR data, have you? Because a physical box in somewhere has been compromised, and that has an AD radius account that's hard-coded. Happens to be a domain admin, they've got that, and now they've got domain admin. Pretty easy stuff. You don't know they've got domain admin, so now they're just creating other admins or doing other things as admins. Okay, that's one scenario. But they may also then think, okay, well, let's just work out what other systems you have and find you've got a cloud environment. And they may then wait for some credentials to be stolen for that cloud environment because they probably don't match the domain environment, but they may be sitting there trying to catch someone administrating some cloud system to see if they can catch something, maybe setting up a new user, provisioning, so they can get accounts to the cloud maybe, or Salesforce or CRMs, whatever important systems they're after. Ransomware is not just about encrypting hard disks, it's about stealing stuff you need to do your business. And they'll sit around and look for you using these tools and go, oh, if we can get access to this system, they can't pay anybody. That's going to be inconvenient for them. Therefore, they'll probably pay a ransom to get that system back. So basically, in the first instance, then, where the domain the VPN's compromised, you probably want to be doing external vulnerability scanning to know that you've got a vulnerable VPN device, and you probably want to do some network traffic analysis to see who's been accessing it and who's been compromising it. So that's where the network traffic analysis, or NDR, might come in. So we'd always want to look at any internet connected gateways and look at traffic in and out. So we can look at things and say, oh, hang on a minute, we can see an exploit. So we've got IDS seeing an exploit, we've got logs from the box itself, the firewall, and then we might be able to detect that exploit, might we, that something's happened, and then maybe they're trying to SSH or reverse shell from the firewall to get credentials back, and that stuff is detectable. So there's your network bit, but say they've done a normal phishing attack, and they compromise an endpoint, what we generally see is an EDR message, okay? Not an AV, not a virus at this stage, but something has tried to run something, a suspicious PowerShell commandlet or a macro, it could be anything, couldn't it? And that's the bit that often gets missed without a SOC, because someone misses it, because it's not stopped it, it's just telling you something odd's happening. The SOC should be going to that user and going, are you running PowerShell? Why are you running this weird PowerShell? You don't normally run PowerShell. But if they're not there, then the PowerShell runs and it fails and logs are generated. But if that user or the hacker gets through, they'll start to clear the logs, won't they? Clear all the logs, clear the audit logs, start to hide the tracks, and then they'll go for lateral movement. Again, that will cross the network. So if you've got network traffic analysis or flow data or some sort of logs from your firewalls, you might see traversal. So if you imagine you've come in on a Monday and everything's off, you haven't got your domain admin credentials anymore. Yeah, what are you going to do? You need the logs connected off the boxes into a logging something, don't you? You need the EDR ideally still running, or at least the EDR data collected somewhere. You need network traffic analysis for a period of time, maybe 3 or 4 days, and you need all those things in a point of an incident, don't you? And ideally, if you want to do that a bit more sensibly, I think of the real way this should have worked is that, say the EDR has sent us a message to say a suspicious PowerShell command that's being ran. In a good, effective MDR-based partnership with an organization, we could be doing what we call SOC think time countermeasures. Maybe we could isolate that machine for 10 minutes from the network, leave Teams and Outlook running, but have a conversation with the user saying, are you running PowerShell? Did you click a link a minute ago? We want to pivot straight from that machine to any email traffic to and from it. What was user clicking on? Were they running Outlook? Were they doing stuff? Going to cloud data? But ideally, we'd be interacting with that first PowerShell strange EDR message. And when it comes to things like the compromised firewall, we should be prioritizing externally facing vulnerabilities, right? That could lead to compromise, high CVSS scoring vulnerabilities. Your SOC should be vulnerability scanning all your endpoints, all your exposed internet IP addresses, domain names, URLs, looking for easy things. Another good example of that is exposed RDP creds. How many times does they get compromised? Or exposed SSH in the cloud? Do you really need to have it open for everybody? You can proactively sort this out. Conditional access, there's loads of different ways of doing this stuff, but organizations generally sort of miss these things. And sometimes supply chain attacks happen like that too, where you find that suppliers open things up or make a change temporarily to do something and don't change it back. Typically that's firewalls with admin access open to the internet temporarily, and no such thing as more permanent than temporary with this kind of thing, or misconfigured rule sets and things like that. There's loads of things you can practically do to minimize this, but I guess to round it all up, there's lots of different ways things can happen. It could be start in the cloud, it could start on the firewall, it could start on the endpoint, it could be all these things. But when you've got XDR deployed, you've got ways of detecting and responding that doesn't rely on any one thing, because any of your one things may get broken during the attack. So you're really trying to cover the whole system with eyes on, and that's that's my explanation, Mark.
Brilliant. I mean, just listening to that, Rob, it makes me think, back to the days when we had worms and everything was just automated. You could predict the behavior, but what you're talking about there are human beings, and we talked about it earlier, human beings finding different things. And that's exactly why I got to it depends to the questions I answered, because it does depend. Every organization is unique, and the attackers will just go and find whatever they can. And it's almost like we're chasing shadows. And you cannot chase shadows unless you've got coverage of the data to understand where they are going or where they have been.